on something like this, where do you get the idea that swimmable area becomes secondary? Obviously, this is not a lap lane. This is not a pool that's really built for that exercise. When do you sort of decide to toe that line between art and function?
It really depends on the situation and the buyer, because, I've dealt with, everybody I meet with, I say, listen, I deal with people from different stages of life. Some people are quite old and they need help, getting in and out of the pool. So we kind of pay attention to that. Other people are, just have young families and we need to make sure it's suitable for a young family. Obviously, this one is not. This is for somebody that wants a piece of art in their backyard that just says, wow me. Like I want something that nobody else has. Don't even really necessarily care how functional it is. I just want to look at it, be proud of it, take pictures of it. We have a lot of buyers like that. Again, we have a lot of buyers that, need pools for therapy. We have people that need pools for their grandkids. We have people that need pools for so many different scenarios. So that's kind of what this one was. It was just to make a nice piece of art in the backyard that I could still kind of plunge around in and really be proud of. And that's kind of what led to this one.
And now, as part of Astor Creek, and this is one of the first models that you see when you are walking the model row, was there an element of that where you want to sort of give someone a showpiece when they're first touring those models to say, hey, here's the full spectrum of what we can do from a design standpoint, an architectural standpoint, an engineering standpoint, and then from there you can sort of show them the different sides of A&G and our design team?
Absolutely. You hit it on the head. We, under some guidance from some of the bosses over there, they basically said, we want wow pools. We want pools that people take pictures of. They couldn't even tell me how many surveys they get from homeowners, but they'll be like, oh, I remember that one house with that one pool. And they don't even remember the inside of the house. They just remember the backyard. And so that's something that some of the executives have said, I need some art pieces that are so different, so non-traditional, if you will, that people take pictures and they remember it and they keep coming back to the website and they finally say, you know what, I'm going to go with that builder. I know I can do anything in my backyard.
Yeah, and I can only imagine, obviously, even in something like Astor Creek, there are about 8-9 different model homes there. And if you're someone who flew in, you've got 3 days, you've toured 4 different communities, finding those pieces that stand out, that really stick in your memory.
100%.
Obviously, that's what someone like a Kolter is trying to capture, but also something that we're trying to stay in the mind of a buyer as well when they come back and ultimately decide to go down that route.
That was the guidance that I usually get on some of these. Some of them are lot dependent. It depends on how big the lot is, what the elevation changes are, but typically I'll have some sort of guidance on what they're looking to achieve. And on this one in particular, it was I need a picture pool, like people that take pictures and talk about it and remember and say, I ain't never seen anything like that,
Now, on that topic, let's talk about this pool specifically. A lot of really unique elements. Obviously, we talked about the practicality not there, but when you get to sort of dismiss that side of things, you say, I don't have to worry about it being swimmable. I don't have to worry about, say, a family or a party necessarily all being in at once. How does that change your design process?
That's when it really opens up, because it's like I pretty much hand drew this without the computer system at first, because I over and over and over, and then I'd scrap it and then I'd hand draw it again and out of like a pen and paper. And I'm like, how can I make this thing unique? Because I didn't have any particular buyer saying I have kids, I have grandkids, I have grandparents, I have, all these needs and scenarios. It was just kind of like a free for all, just go with it. And personally, I've always loved the stepping stones in a pool. It's just typically with a buyer, with a family, it's kind of gets in the way of the swimmable hangout area. But I mean, when you put it together, look how beautiful that is.
No, and the way I just personally love, and when I had the opportunity to take a photograph of this one, the way that you get to tie those deck elements in the tile into the interior finish and not have it be so much one exterior and one interior. You get to have them really interlock in a unique way.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, that's something only really stepping stones can do. This is not a traditional shape. Not even a little bit. So where this feels like something had to inspire this. You had to have seen something, maybe a previous pool, maybe an idea you always wanted to try. How do you get to this point where you say, I'm just going to go beyond the standard rectangle, the standard freeform, create something really unique like this?
That's a good question. I always want to do a spaceship pool. I call this the spaceship pool. I did one kind of similar to it on the river in Stewart. with an infinity edge. This one also has an infinity edge. I did one similar to it. It just didn't have those curves in it, and it looked cool, clean lines and everything. But I decided I wanted to curve the spa. I curved the steps around it as well to kind of all flow. Even the infinity edge is curved with the same curvature. And then of course the 2 curves on the edges. And then when I had it on paper, I was just like, wow, this is really cool. This is unique. I think the executives are going to like this. And then, it all came together. But, you got the sun shelf on both sides. You got the infinity spa, grand entry steps, beautiful upgraded finish, infinity edge on the other side, silver travertine deck. But ultimately the shape is, like you said, very non-traditional. Mainly the lot allowed for this. There's not a ton of lots that I do designs on that allow for a pool to go away. It's always usually right to left or left to right, but this particular one allowed me to do that, so I took advantage of that.
Well, yeah, and I think you did so quite masterfully, if I say so myself. One of the things that always has intrigued me, and this was a question that I had posed to Travis as well, tying in the more rectangular, the more geometric with the curvatures. As you mentioned, that front spa edge, the grand entry steps, obviously the curves on the side there. How do you find that balance where you don't feel like you're being excessively geometric, but you're also not forcing the issue with some of those curved lines?
It's very difficult, to be honest with you. I can't tell you how many times I've dabbled on the computer and I've had everything's geometric, and man, I want to add a little curve here or there. It's very, very difficult because it always throws everything off, Straight lines, square edges, they all go together. And then when you throw that curve, it throws everything off. And like I said, once this thing was drawn out and it was on paper, I was like, this is done. I know they're going to approve this. And they did. And here it is in the ground,
Yeah, and it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, another question for you on the topic of introducing those curves, having those geometric sides as well. Obviously, we both know the sort of history of pool design was often, particularly in its original form, a lot of curvature-based pools, a lot of rounded edges, Roman-style pools, rounded squares. How do you find to create something, to me, this is a design that's going to be timeless. It's going to look great in 10 years, 20 years. How do you make sure you incorporate those classic elements without becoming reliant on those old shapes?
That's a good question. We're all of us here, we're always thinking outside the box. So it's not like I just rely on what I did 6 months ago or 2 years ago or a decade ago. It just all kind of meshes together and it kind of goes with the time. But at the end of the day, every single design we do has a purpose. I tell people all the time, it could be a rectangle. It could be a 15 by 30 rectangle. It could be a 20 by 40 rectangle, but it's still a rectangle, but it's going to serve different purposes. Great example is I had a gentleman a few weeks ago, wanted a rectangle, but he was injured when he was younger, and he needed assistance getting in and out of the pool by the way of a handrail, and he needed to use the pool for therapy. So I said, well, how tall are you? And we made the pool shallow enough where he could walk back and forth and do his laps for his therapy. Then the very next week, I meet with a guy that says, I have 17 grandkids, so I want a big old rectangle. So we gave him a big rectangle. It's the same shape. It just served different purposes, some more water features on there, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's all dependent on the person that's in front of us and customizing it to their needs at their stage in life. Like, again, I talked about stage in life earlier. Some people move here and they're brand new family, young family, and then some people move here and they're retiring. Different stages of life, different reasons for a pool, different accommodations, different ways to get in and out. Some people are sun shelf people. They'll sit in the sun shelf for hours and read a book. And other people don't like the sun, but they want a pool and they want water sound. So again, it's all custom to the person.
Well, I think that's a testament to both you and our entire design team, to where you're taking all those small elements into consideration to create a project of this scale. You and I both know A&G is by no means a cookie cutter company. Everything we do is custom from the ground up. So the advantage of that is being able to take in considerations like someone's height when they're doing therapy, like the amount of people that'll need to be in a pool at one time, and make sure it works for whatever that function is, and not have someone who obviously is making a sizable investment, but it also really pursuing their dream of having this pool in their backyard. We're making sure that gets realized fully as opposed to partially or 80%.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've, gone to someone's house and sat with them and asked questions, and then, I leave and I do the design and I explain why. Why is it this deep? Why is it this long? Whether it's a property situation where there's not enough room or there's more than enough room, just explaining those little details, it really kind of opens it up, and people say, they get into my brain, and then they say, well, that's why he did that, and it all makes sense and it comes together. But one of the other fun parts is they also, we're all of us designers here are also very open to feedback. I love when customers say, I like this, but I want to change this, and here's why. Then we kind of work together. I mean, one of my favorite things is when I meet with somebody and they have a pool drawn on like a napkin or on a piece of paper. It's like, it's the best because they've been thinking about it. They're excited about it. They might not necessarily know the dimensions, but it doesn't matter. It's something, designing a pool is a privilege. It's really a fun thing.
Tell me what the conversation between yourself and our engineering team is like when you propose a 40-foot long curved infinity edge. Are they scratching their heads or?
No, it's when you do something that long, you always have to think about water flow. Is the pump big enough? Is it going to push enough gallons per minute to be able to cover that entire infinity edge and keep it wet? These are things obviously we think about behind closed doors when we're doing, designs outside of the box. In this case, we just did low return lines. We put a bigger pump on there to push more gallons per minute. And we created absolutely beautiful infinity edge, like you said, 40-foot long, curved. Reason for the curvature, the lot was pie shaped. Mm-hmm. So it was like that. And when I looked at the survey, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a tough one. Like, how do I just put a rectangle in there or rectangular style? So I decided to follow the pie and then, connect it with a curved, long infinity edge. And then everything else kind of came together from there. But, yeah, very unique. We've gotten quite a few compliments on it from the people that are out there walking and looking at the models and looking at the pools because they're like, wow, it's one of those wow things,
Yeah, again, like we talked about earlier, this one's certainly a showstopper. When I first walked out into this backyard, you just kind of have to take a moment because, again, it's something that this is not run-of-the-mill. This is not standard by any means. An infinity edge in itself is a bit of a rarity, particularly in Florida where we don't have a ton of elevation change and there aren't these massive drop-offs on property. When we do get to implement them, though, to be able to do something as grand as this. And I think to your point, it's an incredible idea with a pie-shaped lot. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, that's a lot that you're going to see quite a bit out in these different communities, whether you have a corner, whether your street has a bit of a curve to it itself, and that's impacting the way your lot is sized. Being able to sort of take that into consideration and then bring it to life in this beautiful manner is rather impressive.
It was cool. I mean, from a bird's eye view, it all makes sense. From a ground view, I need to walk out there again and see how the fence is laid out, but I'm pretty sure it's just like the survey where it is a pie. But as soon as I seen it, I knew my brain said, you have to follow the pie. And then from there, connect the dots with the infinity edge and then, put your, illusion spa in there and some turf and some other things. And, like you said, the elevation can sometimes be an issue because Florida's pretty flat, but that's what machines are for. We can dig out the back and create the steps to go down to the lower catch basin of the trough. And, you mentioned the tile work, earlier. Kolter design team did a really good job on that. Just kind of thinking outside the box, what's gonna pop, what's gonna say, again, picture worthy.
Without a doubt. Now, I would love to hear, obviously, your process with Kolter is a bit unique. We have our design team that works primarily in the residential space. Mm-hmm. We have a few different designers dedicated to different builders. Obviously, you with Kolter has been a long-standing relationship. How do you find those interactions, obviously, with something like this? As you mentioned, you're working with the design team. When you bring them a design and then they're sort of selecting the colors based upon what they know is in the interior of the house, how do you guys find that balance between the two to make sure everything sort of sympathizes in the proper manner?
That kind of comes together organically by the couple that we're working with. We have a really great design gallery at our showroom with hundreds and hundreds of tiles, very easily accessible, turnstiles on the wall, everything. And pretty much that comes organically. It's not like I go and I say, here, I want you to have this tile. I allow them to look. They'll usually grab one or two and say, this is what I like. And then I can kind of get an idea of what direction they're going in. And that's when I jump in and start making suggestions. When I'm like, okay, you like blues. Okay, you like mosaics. Okay, you like earth tones. Okay, and then I can kind of guide from there. And then I'll usually make a few recommendations alongside what they've already selected, and then we kind of process elimination from there. But it definitely happens organically.
Of course. And then you also have, particularly to take this design as an example, you have the expertise to know not necessarily every tile is going to work on a design like this. When you have something as unique as the infinity edge we have here, knowing what tiles can be functional for that and saying, hey, I understand you really like this color palette. I really understand that selection. But if we're going to do this kind of design, what if we explored these directions?
Absolutely.
Well, obviously, that's where you, alongside other members of the design team, have that experience of 3, 5, 10, 20 years of being in this business, seeing all the changes and evolutions, and knowing how to mitigate those problems long before they ever become an issue.
This is true. I mean, that's one of the really minute details that you have to pay attention to is when you're doing let's say you have a design already done, the homeowner loves it, they sign for it or they're ready to sign, then you start picking tile. And I'll give you an example, a circular infinity spa. And then you go and you pick that tile right there. It doesn't work because you can't turn it enough. The grout joints open up and it just doesn't work. So you've got to think about that. Like, I can only get away with a 1x1, or I can only get away with a 1x2 as far as inches is concerned tile. So yeah, you can absolutely get into scenarios if you don't think about every single one of these details. You can't curve stone. So like if someone wanted a stack stone or ledger stone, you can't curve it. It'd have to be a major, very, very, very minimal radius that you have to pay attention to. So yeah, you're right. Those types of details, it's not just color sometimes. You got to think about shape, you got to think about radius, you got to think about 90s and 45s and what's really going to work and look the best and be the cleanest. So yeah.
Exactly. And again, I think that's a testament to you and the way you're able to implement that knowledge to bring those dreams that people have to life. We don't want anyone ever feeling shortchanged, even if it might be their idea originally. If they have something in mind, we want to make sure we can bring that to life, but we also know how it's going to look based off our past experience.
In a very nice, respectful way, I shoot people's ideas down all the time. And it's not because I feel like I know more than they do. It's just because I've been there and I've seen it and I've done it and I know the materials and I know what can go right. And I'm not saying I know everything, but I've been around long enough where exactly what you're alluding to, where people will come and say, this is what I want, this is my idea. And then I question, like, but do you? And then they're like, what do you mean? And then I explain what I've learned and they're like, oh, as long as they're open to it. But most everybody is, because you're not going to invest, this big of an investment to your backyard without being open to suggestions. And nothing we do here is finite, where I just tell you what it's going to be. I just give you positives and negatives. And I always say to everybody, there's a positive and negative to everything. There's a positive to ledger stone, there's a negative to it with the calcification. There's positive to glass, there's not too many negatives, but it's kind of just, more grout lines, which some people talk about. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, I have no problem inserting what I've learned to hopefully come up, ultimately with the best product at the end of the day.
Of course, in a lot of ways, you're sort of playing the role of an artist or a sculptor in the fact that someone's bringing you this raw material, this raw concept. And then it's your role to sort of chip away at that stone and find out what's the idea in there and what does it really look like? What can it come to life as from that initial concept to something like this where you have execution?
That's right. Absolutely right.